over there?
Beanie says hi. Right, Dungeon Clawler. So, direct from its Steam description, Dungeon Clawler is a roguelike claw machine deck builder where you build your deck, grab weapons and items from the claw machine to battle enemies, discover powerful perks that create game-changing synergies, and unleash crazy combos as you fight your way through the dungeon. At the time of recording, it's currently sitting at mostly positive, with over 1,000 reviews on Steam. It was released into early access on the 21st of November 2024, priced at £8.50, or your regional equivalent. Developed by Straythorn Studio and published by Straythorn Publishing and Playworks. The short version is basically Dungeon Clawler is a great game. It can be played as a casual no-brainer. You can push your luck, see how far you can get into the dungeon, or you can really dive into its synergies that may or may not be thwarted by the look of the claw machine. For less than a tenner, I really do highly recommend it, as it's a really good quick pick up and play game with that just one more run hook to it. Now it's like the longer version. So yeah, you start the game by selecting your character. They all have their own unique claws that can be used to try and collect items from the claw machine itself. They all initially begin with a standard grabbing claw, and then most of them also have their own unique second claw that offers its own way to collect items. One has a magnet, which is really useful for picking up metallic objects. One's got a harpoon, which pretty much guarantees it will pick up whatever it manages to pierce through. And another has a tentacle, which is really good at sticking to any and all objects it touches, with the added bonus of if the tentacle is submerged in water, it opens up, which means it will pick up a lot more useful items. So each run you start with your own basic loadout. Each character's got their own sort of individual basic beginning loadout, and as you progress through the dungeon, you acquire more upgrades, more abilities, more weapons. So each item that gets added to the claw machine has its own attribute: metal or plastic or glass or wood. You can change the attribute at an alchemist as you're progressing through the dungeon. For example, if you picked up the healing wand, which is a wooden item, you could go to the alchemist and change its attribute to metal, which means it's then easier to pick up with the magnet, which is something I personally do a lot on my run. I tend to use the guy with the magnet a lot, and I tend to change a lot of the items to metal at the alchemist to make it easy to pick them up. That's just the strength rings, healing items. Change them to metal, got a much better chance of picking them up with your magnet rather than trying to get your claw, try and finesse it over the top of it and hope that the RNG gods are on your side. Each item does have its own attribute, which does determine how it interacts with the claw and the claw machine and the environment that it's in. Metal objects will cling to the magnet. Items made of wood and plastic will float. Like I said, you can change the attributes at an alchemist for a small amount of gold, which helps you plan synergies in the long run. Like the example I gave before, you can change the healing wand or say a wooden shield from being mud to having the metal attribute. It is then much easier for you to pick up if your character's second claw is the magnet. Or you could also change the metal armor to be the plastic attribute, so that when the tank fills with ink or fills with water, float to the top rather than sitting on the bottom. Really, Beanie? No? Okay. There are also items you can get added to the machine that don't directly attack the enemies or increase your defense. So you can get the oil, which if it's next to wooden items will buff the wooden items. You can also get the Hand of Midas, which will change the fluff that's in the machine. That will turn that to gold, which means you got more chance of getting more gold. There are also some items that increase in damage based on the amount of gold that you've got. Starting to combine things like the Hand of Midas with those items that increase based on the amount of gold you get. The more you start looking into it, the more you can really change how you approach the dungeon based on the items that you select to have in the machine. With items that buff things like the Hand of Midas or the oil that buffs the wooden items, ideally you want to keep them in the machine as long as you can. Yes, there's a chance they'll respawn into the machine as the round restart, but the longer it's in there, the more chance you've got of buffing your items. But yeah, speaking of attacking and defending, the way you actually do that is during each combat scenario, you have your claws and the claw machine. All of your items are emptied into the claw machine, and then you take control of your claw. You move it left or right, and then you choose when you drop it. But also, like with a real life claw machine, there is that wonderful aspect of RNG. So sometimes you might perfectly grasp the item that you wanted, the claw might just drop it, or more annoyingly, it will get stuck on the dividing wall of where your claw machine is and where the prize pool is. Sometimes when I'm using the magnet, it might pick up the item I wanted, but then another item might fly towards it and just decide to knock it off, which is great. But that's part of the RNG. That's what makes the game fun to play. You've got to make your decisions of, you change everything to metal? Do you change other items into different attributes? Depending on your claw will then depend how you approach each run. Oops. Yeah, your early encounters will have you kind of blindly just picking up whatever you can from the machine because you start off with a very my phone decided to interrupt me. Early encounters, you'll start off just blindly dipping into the machine and grabbing whatever you can, because they all start off with a pretty basic outline of attack or defensive weapons. The more you play, the longer you are in the run, the more you can start to determine your build and the items that are in your machine, which then means you start to pay more attention to what your claw is picking up or where your claw is being dropped. Start to pay a lot more attention to where your claw's going. The longer the run goes on, the more you pay attention to where your claw's going and the items in your machine, because the enemies do start to pack quite a punch. Not all items have an immediate use though. There are some items like the bomb. Instead, you'll get the little icon next to your character and it will do a countdown until the round where that bomb is used. And then items that offer you the buffs inside the machine, like the oil, things like that, they don't do any attack or offer you any defense. So it's kind of annoying when you pick them up, but that's just part of the RNG of claw machines. You can't really plan for those kind of things. You can to a degree, but there's still RNG involved. But as the items come out of the machine, roll out in order, and then your character will automatically attack, apply the defense, or apply the buff or debuff as per the item as it comes out. It's all automated. Some items will attack one enemy, some will attack the first enemy, some may attack the last enemy, or others may attack all of them, or might only apply a buff or a debuff. Your character will just automatically do whatever the item tells it to do. Got all your usual buffs and debuffs in the game. Damage over time like poison. You've got evasive dodges that you can pick up from certain items. Strength and damage multipliers. Offensive defense abilities like the spike shield, which means when you get attacked, the attacker will take a small amount of damage as well. Health sapping abilities. There are others you can get in the game, but they're the main ones I can sort of remember at the minute. So even though you're only using the claw during battle, what you do outside of battle can have a huge impact on how well you do. Like I said before, you can change the attribute of any item at the alchemist. One of my strategies that I said before that I really like is changing a lot of the items to having the metal attributes, the easier to pick up with the magnet. Things like having the strength ring and the healing one, change them to become metal. It means it's easier for the magnet claw to pick them up. But even with that strategy, items can still get dropped or they can just fall the wrong way on the machine. So it's never foolproof, but you can certainly try your best. So as well as being able to visit the alchemist outside of combat, you can also visit the blacksmith and they will upgrade your items, and the shredder will remove items, all for a small amount of gold. Now, removing items might seem counterintuitive at first. As you progress through the level, through the dungeon, it makes sense to get rid of certain items. There's a fair few different ways you can approach it. It's really good. Haven't mentioned it's really good. It's a lot of fun. There's also an old little cute granny you can visit where, again, it's a claw machine. You have a chance to pick up some gold, some piggy banks, or some health items to heal your character. Increasing your gold is always good anyway, no matter what world you're in. It's nice having a little grandma who heals you up and shoves a fiver in your back pocket. There are prize rooms as well where you can get different rewards, but they normally come with a risk. There might be spikes that could damage your character. And in the prize rooms, they tend to use the different claws as well. Even if your character has a standard claw and a magnet claw, in the prize room, it'll predetermine what you use. So you might use the tentacle one or the harpoon. And you have to weigh up, is it worth the risk of going for the reward, or do you just bail and save your health for the next boss encounter? There are a handful of boss encounters in the game. You do have some choice in what area you progress to next. Give you some idea of what is coming up in the area, be it a harder encounter, which will grant you better rewards or higher tier rewards, or be it an area where there's more blacksmiths or the alchemists. So when you land into a different dungeon, when you've got the alchemist or your blacksmith or your shredder, you can't go in and out of these places. You can only go into each base once on the floor that you're on. If you go into the alchemist or the blacksmith with no gold, or tough. So you do need to think and plan ahead where you're going to go. Yeah, Dungeon Crawler it's really simple at its core, but it does that simplicity really, really well. Claw mechanic itself is fun and easy enough to use. You just move it left or right, hit the action button for it to go down. You can hit it earlier for it to stop earlier like you can with a real claw machine. Yeah, it's fun and easy to play, and planning for your build and changing the items attributes or what prizes you pick. There is a fair bit of depth to the game if you go into the different types of claws that you use, or what items you choose to have in your machine, which ones you shred, which ones you take as a reward, and what attributes they are. It can have a lot of depth to it if you want there to be depth, or you can just blindly go in and hope for the best, really, to be honest. It plays really well whichever approach you go for. For example, if you go with the Tentacle Claw, that has the bonus of when it's submerged in water, it'll open up, which means it'll collect more items. So then you can change the items you have in your machine. You can start to pick items such as the water bottle. That means every time you pick it up, the claw machine will start to fill up with water. Weapons like the water pistol will be submerged in water, which means then they will cause more damage when you pick them up. There is a fair bit of depth to it if you really want to go down that road. But like I said, you can also just sit back and not really pay a lot of attention and still have fun with it, to be honest. There is a final boss on floor 20 of the dungeon, which if you beat floor 20, you can then continue in endless mode, but floor 20 is essentially the winning point with each character. When you get to floor 20, you unlock that character's higher difficulty, as well as unlocking their lucky charm. What the lucky charms do is when you play the run on the higher difficulty, you can then select from the lucky charms that you've unlocked. So you could have, say, 2 magnets, for example. If you've unlocked it, you could have a magnet and a tentacle, or depending on what lucky charms you've unlocked, will then determine what 2 claws you have. And again, that just adds to the build and the approach and the synergies that you want to approach it with. And the more you play, the more you unlock more characters by either just completing runs or fulfilling certain criteria, which the game normally tells you on the character what their criteria is. And then when you do get to level 20, it's a good end game where you just see how far you can go, how far you can take it with your build until the game just says, no, and just destroys you. But yeah, it's Dungeon Clawler is a really good game. It's a really fun game. It's less than a tenner. It is obviously still in early access, but I think even as it is, it feels like a pretty decent game. You've got your goal of getting to level 20 with each character. Then you've got the higher difficulty tiers to run. You got more characters to unlock. I think it is a really good little game. If you want something that's just casual and easy to pick up and play, Dungeon Clawler is great. If you want something where you have to use a bit more brain power, Dungeon Clawler is also great for that. I highly recommend you give it a chance or look into it or watch some gameplay videos or whatever. If you like the games like Slay the Spire or Rogue Lord, it really will slide in nicely to your catalogue of games. Pick it up and play it and not think about it, or you can spend the time and really, you know, hone in on what synergies and what builds you want. But yeah, I recommend it. I think it's a really good game. I have really enjoyed my time with it. So yeah, Dungeon Clawler. Check it out. It's good. See ya.